Travelers of Darkness Day 1. The beginning of the road, first light of dawn, cast a pale gray hue across the sky. Inside the car, I could hear the soft hum of the engine. James, sitting behind the wheel, had his eyes fixed on the road, lost in deep silence. Beside him, in the passenger seat, Emily just wanted to get to school as soon as possible, like every morning. But today, there was a strange uneasiness inside me. James tightened his grip on the steering wheel, then glanced sideways at me. "I had a weird dream last night," he muttered. "It felt like someone was calling me, but the voice didn't sound human." I rolled my eyes. "Don't put too much meaning into dreams, James," I said. But the unease inside me only deepened. As we moved farther from the city center, the roads became more desolate. The trees surrounding us looked more ominous under the morning mist. A few cars passed by now and then, but one of them, a black SUV, had been behind us for a while. James glanced at the mirror, his expression darkening. "How long has that car been following us?" he whispered. I turned to look. The vehicle, with its completely blacked-out windows, was moving at a steady pace behind us. "Maybe it's just a coincidence," I said, but my voice wavered. Just then, the SUV sped up and pulled up alongside us. No one was visible inside. The windows were like an abyss. Suddenly, it stopped in the middle of the road, forcing James to slam on the brakes. The car skidded, my heart nearly leaping out of my chest. No one got out of the SUV. Its headlights flickered. A deep fear settled in my bones. "Step on it, James. Let's get out of here." James pressed the gas pedal, and the car surged forward. But as I glanced in the mirror, my blood ran cold. The black SUV was following us again without making a sound. It was floating, gliding as if defying the laws of physics, and in that moment, I realized there was no human behind us. Day 2. Silence. At school. Next morning at school, my thoughts were still tangled in what had happened. James tried to act indifferent, but I could see it in his eyes. The fear had gripped both of us. Focusing in class was impossible. I could feel something watching us during lunch. James took out his phone and showed me something. "Someone texted me last night," he said, his voice uneasy. "But there's no number." I looked at the screen. The message contained only 3 words: "Do not return. You will die." The fear burrowed deep into my bones. Day 3. The nightmare begins. Night, I dreamt of a road. A pitch-black, empty road. I was walking, but my legs wouldn't move. A whisper echoed behind me. Come closer." A hand touched my shoulder. I woke up screaming. My phone rang. It was James. "Emily. That car was here again last night," he said, his voice shaking. "I don't think this thing will ever leave us alone." We knew now. The black SUV was a curse. And it wasn't going to stop. Day 4. The call of death that morning. James didn't come to pick me up. I couldn't reach his phone. A terrible feeling settled in my stomach as I made my way to school alone. When I arrived, everything was eerily quiet. The hallways were empty. As I entered the classroom, James's seat was vacant. Panic gripped me. Just then my phone vibrated. A message from James. "The car is here. It's calling me. I can't run. I'm sorry." Right after, my phone screen went black, and then I heard James's voice. "I'm leaving, Emily." The voice didn't come from the phone's speaker. It came from inside the classroom. Slowly, I turned around. James stood at the back of the room. But something was wrong. His eyes were empty, as if his soul had been drained from his body. He was wearing the same clothes from yesterday, but they were stained with blood. Tears welled up in my eyes. "James." His smile reeked of death. "It took me, Emily," he whispered. "Now it's your turn." The light suddenly went out, and from the darkness, the sound of an engine rumbled. The black SUV was waiting in the schoolyard. The dream of the night asterisk in the middle of the night. Dimi's phone screen suddenly lit up. The clock showed 3 o'clock. In a dark room, after hours passing unnoticed, he had woken up to the sound of a call. The person on the other end of the line was a villager he knew, but wasn't particularly close to. "Dimi, there's a huge problem," the villager said, his voice trembling. "My animals, ... They are acting very strangely. Their bellowing won't stop, as if something has driven them mad. Something is wrong. Please, come here." Dimi rubbed his eyes. After a sleepless day, this sudden call, forcing him into action, left a void inside him. But, as a professional veterinarian, he had a duty to fulfill. Without thinking about the time, he quickly got dressed. An inner instinct told him something was wrong, and he had to go. Before long, he was driving down the dark road. At that moment, everything had taken an unexpectedly eerie turn. The car's headlights illuminated the path ahead, while everything else was swallowed by pitch-black darkness. The trees lining both sides of the road swayed with the wind, as if they were alive. There was a nagging feeling that something was missing as he drove along. Dimi's eyes kept catching glimpses of movement in the darkness. Small, indistinct silhouettes. But whenever he focused on them, there was nothing there. Still, in this darkness, where right and wrong blurred together, he decided not to dwell on the figures lurking at the edge of his vision. However, as he continued down the road, an unsettling chill crept over him. Something was off. But what? The forest around him seemed to grow darker. The trees seemed to draw closer together, as if an unseen force was trying to trap him. In that moment, something inside Dimi snapped. This road no longer felt normal. An alarm rang in his mind. As he turned a corner, the village lights came into view. He widened his eyes and pressed forward. But seeing the lights up close only deepened his sense of unease. Everything kept shifting, as if he were stepping into a dream. The uncertainty clouding Dimi's mind pushed him forward, deeper into the village streets. As he approached the village entrance, Dimi stepped out of his car. But this time, something was different. Everything felt eerie and empty. The sounds of animals filled the air, yet not a single human was in sight. Where were the villagers? What had happened? Only the midnight cries of the animals and the unseen eyes watching him remained. The animals stood with puffed-out chests, swollen bellies, their frantic bellowing never ceasing. They were maddened, lost in a frenzy. For a moment, Dimi was lost in the atmosphere. Animals surrounded him, but there were no people. He took a few steps, and everything around him seemed to fade away. Suddenly, he found himself inside a barn, cloaked in darkness. The animals charged toward him, yet they hesitated. They wanted to advance, but each one of them recoiled at the last moment. There was a strange fear and overwhelming terror clashing with their rage. As a veterinarian, Dimi tried to approach the animals with all his knowledge and experience, but everything was wrong. The creatures around him were shifting into shadows, blending into one another. Their chests expanded unnaturally, their fur bristling. The fear in their eyes was so intense that, for a moment, Dimi felt like a stranger even to himself. Something had broken somehow. The spirits of these animals had been lost. Then, something moved outside. The shadows vanished, the animals froze, and an eerie silence fell. But the silence carried a sense of waiting. In this dreamlike world, Dimi realized that everything had faded away, leaving only the lost animals and an unseen force lingering in the darkness. Half consumed by fear, half entranced by this strange power, he felt himself being pulled deeper into it. Suddenly, everything turned black. The bellow of an animal, a distant scream, but none of it was real. And then, as if a dream had been erased, everything vanished. When Dimi opened his eyes, he remembered nothing. The village, the night, the animals, it had all disappeared. He found himself in his room. It was only the early hours of the morning. He couldn't recall the terrifying night, yet there was an unshakable emptiness inside him. Something was missing. Something had been lost. Forgetting that dream was impossible. At that moment, he realized that the minutes he had spent in that village had been etched deep into his soul, as if they had become a part of his very existence. A single question echoed in Dimi's mind. Had he truly woken up, or was he still trapped in a nightmare? The darkness at the end of the road night had fallen, and only a few stars shimmered above me. I was walking alone along the highway, my car's headlights barely illuminating a few steps ahead on the dark road. A strange unease crept over me. At that moment, I had no idea I was about to experience the most terrifying moments of my life. Suddenly, my car stalled. The engine shuddered before falling silent, and I realized the gear shift was stuck. I was alone, with not a single soul in sight. Stranded in the middle of the highway, I pounded on the hood in frustration, but nothing changed. I waited for a while, but then a glimmer of hope appeared. A single car sped past me, but soon came to a stop and reversed toward me. A woman stepped out. Her car had broken down too. Her name was Lily. As Lily approached, I noticed the fear in her eyes growing with every step. She felt like a lost soul. Something was off, but I couldn't quite grasp what it was. I decided to help her. But despite her calm demeanor, something about her was unsettling. Lily's gaze felt like a void, pulling me in, making me lose track of time. I let her into my car, and we drove off. She was eerily silent. Only the soft hum of the engine and the howling wind outside filled the air. Lily barely spoke. No matter how far we drove, we couldn't seem to find the right road. Every turn led me deeper into darkness. The highway felt like some kind of passage, an endless loop with no way back and no destination ahead. After what felt like an eternity, we finally reached my neighborhood. Just a few streets remained. Then, Lily turned to me and asked, "Can I stay with you tonight?" A strange feeling settled over me. Should I help her, or had something already gone terribly wrong? I agreed. As the night wore on, I noticed the strange expression on Lily's face growing darker. When I finally laid down in my bed, I made space for her beside me. But with every passing minute, the atmosphere became more unsettling. I simply watched her, my mind racing with thoughts. She was trying to tell me something, but what? The air in the room felt heavy, shifting in an unexplainable way. It was as if something unseen was watching me. Then, in the midst of my sleeplessness, I opened my eyes. Lily was gone. The bed beside me was empty. That moment, realizing she had vanished, was the most terrifying of the night. But the truth was even worse. She had never left. I closed my eyes again, and suddenly, I felt it. A cold touch. She was so close I could feel her breath controlling mine. Slowly, a shadow appeared at the foot of my bed. A dreadful sensation crept inside me, like something seeping into my very soul. She was no longer just a woman. She had become an entity, an abyss within me. At that moment, I knew I was powerless. I was already lost in fear. Every time I tried to sleep, Lily's smile dragged me into a suffocating void. The walls of my bedroom pulsed as if time itself had frozen. I could feel her presence in every inch of the room, trapping me inside a nightmare that would never end. And then, I woke up once more. Lily's eyes locked onto mine. Something stirred within them, emptiness and sorrow intertwined. She was never meant to belong to this world. She had come from somewhere else, and now she was pulling me with her, turning me into another lost soul. As I lay in bed, paralyzed, I realized the horror had only begun. Lily's presence had consumed my home, every room, every shadow. I was no longer just a man in my own house. I was a ghost, and all Lily ever wanted was for me to disappear into the darkness forever.